Hey everyone, this particular topic, this particular issue is something that hits home for me once again. It's reference to, well, it's on par and aligned with, well, one of the past decisions that the federal liberals come down with was to prevent and end any pretense of having an energy east pipeline. Which, let me tell you, Canada, because we already have the Irving refinery on the East Coast, and we could even build another one if need be. But a pipeline from the Alberta oil sands to take all that oil east to the East Coast, where you could not just sell, and ship off to our southern neighbors in big cargo ships, but we could also send that into other jurisdictions all the world and maybe get more of a premium, a much better price for the oil that we're extracting from Alberta. And in addition to generating economic growth and prosperity as a result of that, it would have also been a tremendous benefit for those people on the East Coast. If you're from the East Coast, from the Maritimes, which I am, you know that that place has been declining economically and demographically for decades now, to the point where the only people back there in places like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, for the most part, are government employees, a few people that work in a few of the remaining sectors that are somewhat viable. Oh, like I say, it's constantly decreasing. Like in New Brunswick, forestry industry was huge. That province went from having many pulp and paper mills and value-added centers to now maybe just barely over a dozen of them function, and sometimes not even on the full 3 shifts. Maybe just certain times of the year, or maybe just 1 or 2 shifts instead. So it's been a steady and continual decrease of jobs and employment opportunities in that part of Canada. And as a direct consequence, as a direct result of that, you have a lot of elderly people, senior citizens, people's grandparents and their great-grandparents that are now getting to those final days of life, or in those days where they need help and assistance, right? They need people close by, family members, to help take care of them in their later years. But how can you do so when there's no gainful employment opportunities? Well, you can't. And a lot of Canadians, this will probably resonate with you, we have to be stuck living in provinces that are a little bit more prosperous, but thousands and thousands of miles away from our loved ones, from our elderly loved ones. So in addition to them suffering, we also have to suffer the fact that we can't be there. That's psychologically damaging for anyone that has care or compassion for the people that are elderly from their family, or even their extended family, or maybe in-laws. I'm sure many of you out there would love to be back on the East Coast, not just helping your elderly parents or grandparents, but enjoying some of that good old-fashioned country living that a lot of us grew up to truly appreciate. I know I would. But as a result, as a consequence of collective preemptive punishments and the lack of other sources of employment, I too have been forced out of my own province. I am one of the people that would benefit tremendously if there was such thing as a pipeline going to that province, going to the East Coast. But that was just one aspect. There's been many other ventures. There was tungsten mining ventures that come in there and tried to see if they could start doing some mining operations that were rejected by environmentalists or the old hacks that just don't want it in their backyard. But it's like, well, you really should start thinking about other things other than, oh, I just don't want any economic activity that's not 100% green. You maybe should concern yourself with the fact that there's going to have to be some economic growth, or just accept the fact that you're going to cause, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of elderly people in the Maritime provinces that will suffer and die alone as a consequence of your fucking bullshit, ridiculous environmentalism. Now, I'm all about, hey, of course I care about the environment. But I'm not willing to cut my fucking nose off to spite my face. You know, yes, hold these companies to, you know, certain or particular standards, as we all should. We're all on board as far as that goes. But they're even preventing, in addition to the pipeline, they're even preventing, there was an initiative, while I was actually still living in New Brunswick, there was an initiative to have natural gas fracking. And if you know the province of New Brunswick, there's plenty of places you could do that stuff where it's like, you wouldn't even know it was happening because it's a very sparsely populated province. There's less than, what, like 750,000 people in that fucking province? You know, probably 90% of the entire province, nobody lives there. And you could be tens or hundreds of miles away from anybody, not disturbing anyone, and do some natural gas fracking without having any negative consequences, ramifications, or results towards the population. But, you know, the environmentalists or the special interest groups, that they put a kibosh and they prevented that from ever happening. They put a moratorium and a ban on fracking in that province. So, once again, every time somebody tries to generate or create any kind of economic growth or prosperity in the Maritimes on the East Coast, the political or the pundit class or special interest groups or those that work for government who don't understand proper economics and how their paychecks, like you work for the government, you think, oh, your money it's just free, right? No. That money has to come from somewhere. And normally it's supposed to come from taxation, even though now it's looking at future generations to pay off these debts. They're just putting it on the credit card, right? They're just putting future obligations and liabilities onto the unborn at this stage. But, you know, to pay all that stuff, you need to generate actual revenue and income to make that all work. You know, you thieves, you actually have to let the people that you're stealing from make a couple bucks before you can fucking steal it. But they're too fucking stupid, too inept, and so entitled and so out of touch with the reality and the private sector, they don't even seem to understand or grasp that reality. If people on the East Coast, I know there's a lot of you that aren't even there anymore. You're all in different provinces. But listen, we really got to do our best to create prosperity for all of Canada. Not just a province here or a province there. And fuck this crony corporatism and socialism in central fucking Canada. Right? And I mean, the oil patch, God love you guys at the oil patch and girls, but, you know, it can't be the only economic activity that we can rely on in Canada. We have to have prosperity across this great nation, from one ocean to the other, you know, from the border of the U.S. all the way up to the north. We got to make sure that everybody has the potential to be economically prosperous and viable. It has major, not just economic, but social ramifications. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.